We're now joined by Sheehan of Severe MMA. Let's jump straight into it. It's UFC 247 fight week. Jon Jones is back. He fights Dominick Reyes. We haven't got a failed drug test just yet, but I'm waiting. It should come very, very soon. The pulsing effect and all that. But Sean, what's your thoughts on this fight going in? How do you rate Reyes as a challenger to Jon Jones?
I think he's a pretty good challenger, and it's tough to say because you're fighting Jon Jones. It's like Liverpool at the moment. How good are teams that actually play him because they're so much better than everyone? It's tough to know how good they are, when they go up against that person or when they're entering that match at the start. So, you're going up against Jon Jones and arguably the greatest of all time. For me, the second or third greatest of all time behind Dimitri Johnson, maybe George St. Pierre as well. But by far and away the best light heavyweight of all time, and just a tough matchup in all areas. Like, talking this week about the fight in different places, and he can fight in every way. Jones could go out and he could take you down, he could beat you on the feet, he could fight off the back foot, he can attack you, he can fight you in the clinch, he can beat you everywhere, he can submit you, knock you out. So to beat Jones, what's the game plan to beat Jones? I do this thing over on our Patreon, the rewatch, where I watch a Jones fight, I watch a Reyes fight, and see maybe gaps in both their games or good things about them, how they can fight the other person. And it's very difficult to see any way of beating Jon Jones because his adjustments are so good. Like, he come out doing one thing and you could have success, like Thiago Santos had, like Alexander Gustafsson had a little bit, and he can turn around and switch and win the last two rounds and take away the fight. So I suppose to kind of start it off a long-winded way of saying it, it's very difficult to fight Jon Jones. But Dominick Reyes has good things, and he can definitely do good things against Jon Jones.
Do you think it's a case in Reyes's case that maybe because the division is, I wouldn't say weak, but it's maybe lacking, or at least it's just because Jon Jones is so good that he might be getting to this point a little bit too quickly?
Yeah, I was talking to Graham on the podcast about that as well this week, and I think that's definitely it. But it's funny in MMA sometimes you think people are getting there too early, and it's not too early. Like Chris Weidman, I thought it was too early. I wrote this big article saying that he'd no chance against Anderson Silva and everything. He goes out and knocks him out. So I've been stupid before, so I won't do it again. But I probably will do it again. I think it is a little bit too early. Like, watching back Reyes' fights, and this is the first time Reyes has been in, obviously, a title fight, but in a kind of a huge fight. The Weidman fight was a big fight, the Cannonier fight, the Volkan Ozdemir fights, all good fights. But this is the first time I did a real deep dive on him as a fighter, and he fights in such a way that I think he will improve. You talk about maybe in 18 months he'll be a little bit better. I think he will. But it's, as you said, the division is so light. We saw it at 125 pounds as well. That division was so light for so long. People were getting there just too early against Demetrius Johnson, and that was a big issue. And I think that's even more so for Dominick Reyes because the way he fights has a lot to do, I think, with timing and a lot to do with, maybe rounds in there. And he's got a few rounds over his last few fights, in fairness to him. But I think the more experience, the more rounds he gets in there, the better he actually will be.
Yeah, like Jon Jones as well lately. Like, he was known as a finisher early in his career, but it hasn't seemed to be going that way for him in his last few fights. Do you think that that's a thing of the guys catching up with him and maybe getting to his level, or do you feel like maybe it's the pressure of being champion and not wanting to lose instead of actually wanting to win and get out there and finish guys?
The thing is, we actually don't see it that often in MMA, but dominant champions like that, they're the person that's there at the top of the game all the time. Like Conor McGregor, when he was coming up at 145, who's he aiming for? Aldo. Chris Weidman coming up at middleweight, who's he aiming for? Anderson Silva. Everyone's aiming for Jon Jones as they go up now. They're developing their games to beat Jon Jones. It has been unsuccessful so far, but that's what they're doing. Also, every time you're fighting someone really good. You're fighting someone on a 4 or 5 fight win streak who's has building momentum, who's right at the top of their game, at their confidence levels are sky high as well. And I think that's the issue. We see a lot of that in MMA, just at the high level because it's so tough. But I think a thing with Jones as well. It's funny, I said the same thing maybe before the last fight, but I've gone back and watched a few of his most recent fights, and I actually think he's trying to change a little bit. Like, he finished Gustafsson, okay, the Thiago Santos fight was a little bit different. I think maybe that fight went a little bit tougher for him than he expected. But I think Jones is adjusting his style. He's adjusting his style in that he's fighting in many different ways in the same fight because people kind of maybe know what to expect from him a little bit more in those different ways of fighting. But I think he also knows how judging is these days, and he knows that if you're jabbing around and you're trying to win a 5-round decision against someone by just maybe landing more shots than him, that's not good enough these days. When you're fighting a hitter like Dominick Reyes, like Thiago Santos, like Anthony Smith or so, you have to up it. You have to be perfect defensively, but I think you also have to land bigger, harder shots. And especially in that Gustafsson second fight, he was throwing away more power shots than he normally does, and in the end he took it down to the ground and got the finish there. But I think he sees that. I think Jon Jones is intelligent enough. Most people in MMA don't bother looking at judging, don't bother looking at how that game has changed and how you should adjust to it. But Jon Jones, by watching his last few fights, I think he definitely has. So that's an interesting thing to take into this fight and see, will Jon Jones be going, maybe not power for power with him, but landing more powerful shots than maybe we've expected out of him before.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point as well, Sean. I think that people underestimate the guys like this, like Jon Jones, who can just keep winning at the top of the game. Yeah. Like, just keep winning and defending that title, because, like, as you said, all these guys under him are gunning for him. They're building out their game plans to beat him, and he's looking down, and he can't really look at one guy. It's just all these new contenders. So I do think people underestimate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Like, that's probably the toughest thing to do in MMA, because MMA is a game where, they say that the game of 8 limbs, where you can throw so many different things and you can do so many different things all the time. The hardest thing in MMA is to beat someone who knows what's coming. know, and against, if you're at how many title defenses he has? I think I read today it was a 13.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Fights or something like that. That's an awful lot of tape on someone. As you said, he's gone to a lot of decisions. That's an awful lot of tape on someone to be able to look at and to be able to analyze. Dominick Reyes is only 12 fights. Never mind title fights at the very, very top level. Dominick Reyes probably only has 2 or 3 fights of being at the top level. So it's a very different game the two people going into these fights are playing, and it just shows how good Jon Jones is, that he can stay at the top when that's the case. Yeah.
One thing we talk about on the show, or we talked about at least last week, was Jon Jones and heavyweight, because that's the big discussion. It's, will Jon Jones go up, or will Israel Adesanya eventually fight Jon Jones? They're the two big questions. But my question to you is, would Jon Jones, or would his legacy be affected if he never goes to heavyweight? If he continues to fight at light heavyweight and continues to defend his title, would his legacy be affected if he never makes that move up?
Do you know what? I think that's a question we can't answer in MMA, because who has a legacy in MMA? Like, name one person in MMA who's actually retired. Like, there's no one. Is Ken Shamrock retired? Is Heist Gracie retired? No, they're like the people who fought in
GSP UFC maybe, but we still don't know about him.
He's not retired either. Like, no, there's nobody retired in MMA. So we don't really, we talk an awful lot about legacy in MMA, but who actually has legacy in MMA? Who's looking back at their career to see their legacy? It's a question maybe we'll be able to answer in 15 years or something like that, because these people just be so old they won't be able to fight. That's the only way I think is stopping people from fighting in MMA. But look, I think about Jon Jones and him moving to heavyweight. This might sound bad, and it is bad, but Jon Jones is a bully. That's what Jon Jones is. He goes in there, he bullies people, he beats people at what they're best at, and he just bullies people. He wants to be the bigger, better guy at all times, and by Jon Jones going to heavyweight, he can no longer be assured of being the bully. So it's interesting to see if he will give up that, if he will go to heavyweight.
We lost Sean Sheehan there for a second. We will reconnect. Yeah, we just lost you there for a second, but we got the gist of what you were saying. We're going to get a pick off you, Sean. I don't know if you've put out your picks yet, but what's your pick in the main event of this one?
I actually sent it to someone there a minute ago. Is Jon Jones anyway? I think he'd win by submission in around round 3. I think that was my official. So it will be out in severe America.
Yeah.
Turn the weeks over, but I think that's it. I actually am not ruling out Reyes out of this fight at all, to be honest, and I think lots of people are. But haven't watched him. I think he has plenty ability. He has the ability to break the distance. I actually think, maybe not a better athlete than Jon Jones, but in a certain way he is a better athlete. I think he is faster and more powerful than Jon Jones in certain ways at breaking that distance from the outside. I think he's fantastic at doing that, attacks the body very well as well. I think he'll do that against Jones, but I feel like Jones will get the opportunities to wrestle with him. I think Jones is way better in the clinch. I think he'll take him down from the clinch and probably end up submitting him at some stage, but I don't think it's a gimme for Jones at any stage. But you can't pick against Jon Jones until he loses. So I have to go with Jones.
I know you like a bet as well, Sean. Do the odds of 5-1 on Reyes interest you? They don't really interest me a lot, personally.
It's a bit low, I think.
It's a bit, yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit small.
Yeah.
You'd probably have to be going towards 7s, 8s, 9s for me to be interested.
Yeah, I haven't had a look at it. Be doing the betting show on Friday, but I haven't had a look at the odds so far. Like, if I was to take a shot in Reyes, I'd probably just go in the
You'd pick
round
a
1 or
something.
round 2 knockout.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'd probably be going for, because I think past that, Reyes actually has very good cardio, but I think against Jon Jones, there's no one knocking. No, he'd watch him get knocked out in the 5th round. But I think he's so good at adjusting the fighters that if you get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th round against Jon Jones, you're
He has
screwed,
your
to be honest.
game
So
plan,
I think Reyes early is the bet.
Yeah, it's difficult. One thing Reyes does have now, his reach is 77 inches. I thought it was more, but at least he does have that frame, the bigger frame that Jon Jones seems to struggle with. We don't know if he does, but he seems to struggle with it at least a little bit.